I'm going to go through my takeaways from Judy Blume's writing masterclass. So she first addresses why we write. So writing helps your readers feel like they're not alone. Writing is risky, but you can't teach writing. You can only share advice because we write to process our own feelings and our life events. So you can't tell someone else how to do that. Thinks is very important is observation. So your job as a writer is to observe the world around you. Be a people watcher. Make sure that you're listening in on conversations, as creepy as that sounds, and writing down things that you hear that you find interesting, because this will help you to write interesting, real characters. If you take your dialogue from the world around you, of course it will be relatable and sound good because you're taking it from the actual real world. She also says that you want to get comfortable analyzing yourself and the situations that are happening in your life. Your life isn't boring, it's just the truth. So if you look at a situation, you need to actually dive into that situation because otherwise it might come across as boring. All it takes is one idea or one thought, and you can run with that and turn it into something truly powerful. It doesn't have to be some sort of crazy thing that happened to you. It could be a mundane thing, but the way that you look at it makes it important and impactful. The next thing she talks about is mood. The mood that you're in is going to greatly impact your writing. So if you are coming from an angry or sad place, that's going to come out in your writing. Sometimes you just have to leave yourself alone with those uncomfortable thoughts and ideas and not allow the world to be a distraction. And you're going to see this advice from a lot of writers, is that you have to push out the distractions in your life and focus on writing. Writing has to be a priority for you. And also write everything down. Don't discount anything. Anything could turn into a great story. She goes on to talk about an idea box or a notebook. So having something to fall back on, she says, is important because it helps you not have that blank page that's scared to start. If you have a box or a notebook full of things that you've written down from what you've heard around you or ideas that you've had, that makes it a little less intimidating. So flipping through your notebook or looking through your box, one, makes you feel more comfortable, but two, you might find something in there from years ago that you feel that you're more able to talk about now. Also, feel free to ask people around you if you can observe the things that they're doing in their life. So if you want to write a story about a detective, then maybe you can shadow one and get that perspective in there. Also, great writing oftentimes returns to the sort of specific emotions we have as children, because children have very raw, pure emotions. So if you can go back and try to think about those questions that you had as a child, oftentimes those make great things to write short stories off of. Also, don't worry about thinking about themes, she says. Just write. The theme will make itself apparent later on. Another important thing she brings up that many writers bring up is that you need to read to be a good writer. So you might not know all the logistics and the grammar and the sentence structure, but by reading, you kind of get those things ingrained in you. You know how you want it to sound, or maybe how you don't want it to sound. She says that if you read books in your genre, then you will have an idea of what those books sound like, and you can figure out the things that you like and don't like. She does caution later, though, that you shouldn't get stuck in one genre. So read lots of different things, kind of allow yourself to have that openness and don't get tied down to one particular genre. Next, she talks about doing your research. She does have a funny story about falling into just researching, though. A lot of people will get super excited and be researching things, and then they never start actually writing anything, and this is an easy trap to fall into. They will also start writing in a way that sounds very researched, and that's something you don't want as well. But she says just write it all down and your editor will help you take it out later. So she relies heavily on her editor to make sure that she doesn't have parts that drag or are boring or sound too knowledgey. She writes primarily for young adults, so this is very important to not bog down the things that she's writing. She very much advocates for handwriting your notes. And being willing to change things. So as you're looking from your notes and you start typing on the computer, or in her case, a typewriter initially, you might be changing your characters' names or thinking about your title, but by having those handwritten notes, again, it makes it less intimidating to start writing on the blank page. Because you have all these scribbles and stuff down to help jog your memory and to kind of spur you on to the next thing. Next, she talks specifically about characters, and she believes, as do a lot of short story writers, that characters are the most important thing to a story. She then goes on to talk about how she acts like her characters are real people and talks to them and has them write letters to her and just really develops this close emotional connection with them to the point where she cries and stuff when she's done writing her book because she's never going to see her characters again. So her talking about character is a very passionate process, but the takeaway is that characters are very important and should feel real to the reader. Which brings us into dialogue, which again, she said to listen to the people around you. People don't usually talk in full sentences, and also never, ever, ever use a thesaurus. She talked about how it just doesn't make you sound more intelligent and also doesn't make your characters sound like real people. She says to stay away from slang because that dates books, meaning they'll be like, oh, this sounds like it was written in the 80s or the 90s. You want to stay away from slang phrases if you can. And then play around with what characters are thinking versus what they're saying. So write maybe what they're thinking and then have the dialogue there so that we as the reader feel like we're in on a little bit of a secret. And then she just had some other advice that surprises are good. She advocates not planning out what you're going to say or where the story is going. And if you need to do that, having just a short outline. She also advocates never writing about a place that you haven't lived. So maybe if a character's just on vacation or something like that, you could mention a place that you have also vacationed, but you should always set books in places that you know. She also talks about how she has a messy mind and she just lets it all come out on paper and then she'll go back slowly and clean it up. Write a lot and then cut things out later. And again, she mentions that facing the blank page is the worst part. So make lists, make notes, anything to just write and get things out on the paper. Lastly, she talks about how writing is not fun. Writing is work, and you need to have a good work ethic. And that writers write because they need to, not because it's a fun profession or hobby to have. She also says there's no such thing as writer's block, that you just have good days and bad days, and that sometimes you need to physically remove yourself and then come back and read things later or come back to the page later and go through your box or notebook of ideas. Read aloud and edit as you go, because once things are published, there's no taking them back and changing them later. And the editors are there to help you. Your editors want what's best for you. They want it to be a good book as well. So listen to them, usually, unless they're causing you to change something that you think vehemently is against who your character is. And don't be offended, but don't destroy your writing either. And the last thing she says is don't be afraid of rejection. Just keep writing and know that you're writing for you, and don't worry about the other stuff that will come down the line. Somebody somewhere will want to publish your work for what it is or to help you change your work for the better. So just keep writing.